Welcome to Still Kicking, the show that highlights senior centers around the state of Kentucky and investigates the lives and achievements of the seniors they serve. We're in Scott County for a special episode. Our friend and partner, the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, has come by to visit us today. Come inside to meet their animals and to learn more.
I'll tell you just a tiny bit about Kentucky Reptile Zoo so you know where I'm coming from. We are located near Natural Bridge State Resort Park and the Red River Gorge out in Powell County. And there's basically three things that we do. Number one, we provide venoms that are used in medical research, actually all over the world. We currently have somewhere around, I think just under 2,000 individual snakes. Most of those are venomous snakes like cobras and vipers and rattlesnakes of various sorts. And probably about half of our customers are here in the US and the other half are overseas, and there are people doing biomedical research with the venom. Second thing we do is education, which is obviously why I'm here. And we also have an exhibit that's open to the public, and we do things online with Facebook and YouTube and that sort of thing. And then the last thing that we do is try to encourage and promote research and conservation of reptiles whenever we can. Now, I've been working at the zoo for about 20 years. So I've talked to a lot of people about reptiles in general and snakes in particular. I do have at least one of every main sort of reptile to talk to you about today or show you today. We're actually going to start out with a lizard. So this is called a blue-tongued skink. And this is a lizard that is native to Australia. And I'm sure you can, you can see her blue tongue, which is fairly bizarre. Now these are related to the skinks that we have here. If you guys have ever seen the little lizards with the bright blue those are called five-lion skinks. And those guys are obviously much smaller than this lizard is, so they don't really make good programming animals. But it's the same family of lizards. Now blue-tongued skinks, of course, get their name because of their tongue. Pretty crazy looking. Yeah. And they actually, well, does anyone want to guess why their tongue is blue? Or you just want me to tell you?
Just tell.
Well, their tongue is blue because they actually use it as a defense mechanism to scare predators.
No.
And the reason that they do that is because they really don't have much other defense. So they have some camouflage. And if you look at her, she's from a pretty dry, like kind of desert grassland habitat. So, you know, you can see she's got good camouflage for that. However, she really has no other ability to protect herself other than staying camouflaged. If you look, her legs are extremely small and tiny. And so she can't really run very fast. She doesn't have big sharp claws or teeth or anything like that that she can use to protect herself. She's not venomous or poisonous at all. And so basically what she does is play a mind game with the predator. And if the predator gets close to her, and there's lots of things that enjoy eating something like this skink, if a predator gets really close to her, she will actually stand up and flap her tongue at them. And it's what she does is she opens her mouth really wide. She has a big mouth. The corner of her mouth is like right where my finger is here. So she has this giant mouth. Like her whole head opens up, kind of like Pac-Man, you know. And her tongue will flap up and down. It looks like a flag waving in the wind. It is crazy looking. And the predator sees the lizard carrying on. The predator is like, well, what the heck is going on? Right? Because it's just bizarre looking. And of course, an animal that's in the wild is always going to be cautious of something it doesn't understand because, you know, they're very vulnerable to being injured or sick. So they don't like to take chances. And so the lizard is basically just playing a mind game with whatever the predator may be. Maybe it's a larger lizard or a bird of prey or something like that. And the predator will hesitate when the lizard does this crazy display, and that allows the lizard to have a few minutes to escape some extra time in order to get away. So that's why their tongue is blue. There are other animals that have that sort of kind of defense mechanism. It's called a flash color, to have a color that's completely different from the rest of its body, but you can only see it if the lizard allows us to see it. And there's an animal that lives here actually that has a flash color too. It's the gray tree frog. And I bet on this property, with all the trees and stuff around here and the rain we've been having, I bet if you go out in the evening tonight around this building, you would probably hear gray tree frogs. You guys, I'm sure, have all seen a tree frog before. They get their name because they sit on trees. They have excellent camouflage. But they have kind of the same problem as this lizard in that they're not really a very athletic frog. So their ability to escape is somewhat limited. They still will try to jump or hop to get away, but they're just not really that fast, and they can't jump really that far for a frog. So if a predator starts to get close, the frog, actually the inside part of its back legs, you guys know a frog is going to sit kind of with its back legs folded up, and when it jumps and it kicks out, the inside part of its back legs right in here is kind of like a bright orange or bright yellow color. And it works exactly the same way. The predator sees that bright color as the frog jumps, and it gets startled by that color, allows the frog a little bit longer to get away. So it's basically the same idea as what the lizard is doing, but different part of the body, different kind of animal, same process. Which I think is really cool. I'll tell you one other interesting thing about her. You might know that the skinks we have around here, if they get scared or threatened by a predator, they can actually break off their own tail. And the tail will kind of flop around and look interesting, and the predator will look at that, and the rest of the lizard can escape, and they can grow back their tail over time. But this lizard cannot lose her tail that way. And the reason for that is because she lives in a very dry area, she has to be able to store food and water somehow to make it through the dry season, which is otherwise would be a problem for her. So these lizards actually use their tail as fat storage. And you can see she has kind of this big fat tail. If she were underweight or coming out of the dry season in the wild, her tail would actually be really skinny. And so because it's important for her to be able to store extra fat there, they actually cannot break off their tail, because it would be a real problem for them to lose it, whereas it's less of a problem for the skinks we have around here. And she can actually survive something like 4 months without having to eat anything at all, which is pretty amazing. We could not do that, right? But imagine what we could save on our grocery bills if we could go that long without eating. It would be handy.
How old is she?
I don't actually know how old she is. We've had her about 10 years, and she was an adult when we got her. So she's probably, approaching 20, something like that. She could live to be around 40 or 45 years old. So they live a pretty long time.
How old is she and how big is she?
Well, she is like a grayish brown.
Sandy brown?
And yeah, kind of like the color of sand or rocks. And she has like speckles, maybe is the best way to put it, on her back to help her blend in if she's like sitting in a tuft of grass or something like that. But her tongue is bright blue.
Yeah.
And nothing else is, just the tongue.
And how long is she?
How long is she, you guys?
Like 12 inches?
Yeah, I was gonna say around a foot, maybe a little bit longer than a foot, but her legs are only about 2 inches long. And they're very small. The lizard itself is shaped like a sausage. And then her legs are little teeny things that stick out.
I'm ready to be put down.
Yeah, she's like, okay, lady, this is long enough. Well, you guys ready to see the next one?
Yeah.
Sure, we'll get that out. That is a snake.
With Gary.
Am I? Yeah.
There she is.
Yeah, and I will tell you about it. So this is a greenish rat snake. You were talking about rat snakes earlier. So this is not one from Kentucky. The ones that we have up here tend to be darker than this one. This is one that's like from the Carolinas, and the color tends to be a little bit brighter there. They get a darker color in the northern part of their range because the dark color helps them to absorb heat from the sun better. And so the warm warmer areas where you could still find rat snakes, they tend to have a brighter color because they don't need to be as dark to absorb the heat. So this is a very close relative of the black rat snake, or what some people call a cowsucker or a cow snake, that we have here in Kentucky. It's almost the same kind of snake, it just has a little bit different color. And you were asking if I've ever been bitten by a snake. The best way to get bitten by a snake is to pick them up. And most people in the US who are bitten by snakes are bitten because they intentionally come in contact with the snake. They see it and they try to pick it up, harass it, bother it, whatever, and the snake gets scared and it bites. Well, of course, my job is basically harassing snakes all day. So I have been bitten. We don't really bother counting bites from snakes like this. I mean, this is a small snake that's totally harmless. It can't hurt anything. Unless you're a mouse or a rat, this snake cannot really hurt you. So if this snake were to bite me right now, nothing much would happen. I might bleed a very small amount. You guys would probably be a little freaked out, but it wouldn't be anything to really injure me or cause me any problems. A venomous snake obviously is a different situation. I have been bitten by a venomous snake, since you asked. Remember, we provide venom, so most of the snakes that we have are venomous snakes. Mine is from a western diamondback rattlesnake, and I take care of those a lot, so that was why. But we also try to be very prepared for a bite. Since we have those animals, we need to be responsible about it, obviously. So I got about the best care you can get for a snake bite because we're prepared. We have consultants, and University of Kentucky, which is where we end up going, has always been really good to us. So yeah, we have the best scenario we can if we screw up. Because it's always our fault, of course. If you bring an animal into captivity and it hurts you, it's your fault. You're the one who has that animal. So that's how I look at it.
Is the snake green?
So, well, I said green, but it's not really a green. I think it's more of like a dirty yellow color.
Yeah.
And it kind of has darker looking blotches, but they're all kind of a shade of dirty yellow. And this snake's probably 3 or 4 feet long, somewhere in there. About as big around as a ping pong ball, maybe.
They get pretty big.
They can, yes. The record for rat snakes is about 8 feet long. So they can be quite large. And, you know, you don't see them that big as often anymore because people, I think, tend to kill them before they get that size, unfortunately. Because a rat snake is actually a really good snake to have around because they eat mice and rats. And, you know, I'm sure you guys, I don't need to explain to you that rats and mice can cause problems for humans.
Right. Now,
So,
when they eat our mouse,
mhm,
they swallow the whole thing whole.
they do.
Now,
So-
what about a rat?
They swallow the rat whole too. So this snake, even though it isn't a really large snake,
Right.
this snake is capable of eating what I would call a medium rat, which is about, you know, yay big. Not like as big as a rat can get, but like a young adult rat. This snake would
And
be
they just
capable of
swallow it
eating.
whole.
They do.
I've seen them swallow a catfish and a.
Oh yeah, yeah. So water snakes will eat catfish all the time, and I've seen catfish, or not catfish, I've seen water snakes that have eaten a catfish, and the barb has actually stuck through the side of the snake. The snake's like totally fine. And eventually the fish like digests away, and the barb just falls out. And I'm pretty sure that would kill one of us if we had ate something and like impaled our stomach and was sticking out of our body. We would not be in good shape. But the snake seems totally okay with it, which is just amazing.
Bird nest
They will, yes. Rat snakes will crawl up and eat bird eggs or baby birds, and they're very good climbers, partially because of the way their body is shaped. So they are completely flat on the bottom, and then they have, if I can make him, you guys see that? They have like where the side of the snake meets the bottom. Do you see that? He can almost make like a little ridge right there.
Yeah.
You guys see that?
Yeah.
So that enables the snake. You see like the little ridge between my fingers right there? So what they do is when they're climbing, they can actually create that little ridge and stick that into a crevice in the bark or a wall or whatever. And so they really are excellent climbers. You see that little ridge there? So you guys see that little? See, I'm like between my fingers. And that's how they're able to climb so well, because it seems counterintuitive, long, skinny thing could be able to crawl up like that.
Mary, you can open your eyes now.
I'm looking away.
You won't take that home, Rita?
So,
Here's what I can hear.
snakes cannot hear airborne noises. They don't have any external ear openings. So they don't have the hole in the side of their head to catch the airborne sounds. But they do have the same bones inside of their head that are in our ears. So those bones can still sense vibration, which is of course all sound is anyway. And when the snake is on the ground, or more likely on like a fallen log or a branch or something like that, if the branch vibrates, the snake can still sense that. So they're not, in a way they're deaf, because like he can't hear what I'm saying about him right now, you know. But because my body is creating some vibration, he probably can feel that when his head is in contact. So, you know, when his head is out like this, he's probably not sensing any sound at all. But if his head is in contact, the jawbone and the base of the neck there will actually transmit some of that vibration to those bones. So what do they use that for? I don't know how useful that is. I guess it might be useful for, you know, things like storms, if it's windy or something like that. It might help the snake know that it might need to take cover or something. But it's not like, you know, I don't think they're going to sense like a predator walking up on them unless it's a person. You know, most predators are pretty soft-footed, right? So I can't really tell you what the point is, but it's probably just residual, and doesn't really serve a lot of purpose for them. Yeah.
How long did it take you to get used to having a snake crawl on you like that?
Well, I will tell you, I have this theory that people are either afraid of things without enough legs or of things with too many legs. So snakes never really bothered me. Like there's a picture of me, I grew up near Cleveland, there's a picture of me at the Cleveland Zoo when I was like 8 with a big snake. We were members of the zoo, my family was. But things with too many legs, I really had to work at not having a problem with those. So like even you guys know those real pretty millipedes we have here, the like blue and red millipedes? They're completely harmless, but it took me years to be able to hold one of those without going, blah. Yeah. So for me, like that's my issue, it's not the snakes. The snakes have never really bothered me. But the like creepy crawly insects and millipedes and stuff, that was harder.
Do they sense if you're afraid of them?
I don't think so. Not in the way that like, you know, a horse or dog is going to be aware that you're not happy. I don't think snakes do the same thing, but I do think they're aware of jerky, uncomfortable movements. So you'll notice that I'm not really holding the snake. I'm just like a tree for the snake to sit on. I think if I were to do this and be holding on to him the whole time, he would get upset with me. That would scare him. He would be uncomfortable. So, I don't know, I kind of forgot where I was going with that. I think
girl snakes and boy snakes.
Oh, well, you can't unless you've really seen a lot of snakes. But male snakes have 2 copulatory organs that they store in the base of their tail. And they're called hemipenes. And I can tell you guys. So they have 2 because the way snakes mate is the male wraps its tail around the female. And they have 2 because no matter which way they wrap, this way or this way, they still have one that can access the female that way. So that's why there's 2, is because of the way that they breed. And of course they're kept inside to keep them clean. And male snakes, because of that, have thicker and longer tails than female snakes do. But unless you've seen a bunch of snakes, it's hard to have the frame of reference to know if it's a male or a female. This is a male, which I know that, but I can try to show you. He'll untangle himself. I know. He's like, I was holding on. So if you see his tail here, his cloaca, which is like their multi-purpose opening, the digestive tract and the reproductive tract empty into the cloaca, which is right here. And then you can see he's got a pretty long tail past the cloaca. And if it were a female, the whole tail would probably end like about where my knuckle is right here. And it would be much thinner very quickly past the cloaca. So it would be, you know, like the snake's body, and then female snakes almost look like they have a butt, because then the tail gets really small fairly quickly past the cloaca, whereas males have this kind of long tapering tail because of the hemipenes being in there. But, I mean, that's so. Or if the snake lays eggs, then it's a girl.
Now I notice he likes to wrap himself around a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's basically just holding on.
Yeah.
You know, so for a snake, being suspended is not the most comfortable thing because it's only one part of their body that's in contact with the ground. You see, it's like us trying to balance, you know, on our tiptoes or something. It's harder for them. So it's going to be more comfortable for him to just keep wrapping around so that more of him is in contact with, you know, the substrate, which is moving right now. So
if we were on a hike and we greeted him, would he want to like attack, or if he did bite, would we get hurt?
Well, so the first thing is, if you encounter a snake while you're outside, hiking or doing whatever, if you're able to just see the snake and leave it alone, the snake is not going to bother you. It might do some sort of defensive display depending on how close you are to it. So if you're really close, rat snakes will rattle their tails like a rattlesnake will. They don't have a rattle, obviously, but the vibrating in the leaves will make a similar noise. They might put their head up. They might even gape at you if you've really gotten very close to them or they're very upset. They don't normally do that, but occasionally they will. Baby ones sometimes will do that. It's adorable. But if you haven't gotten too close, they probably will just try to move away. If you don't do anything, if you're like, oh, snake, look at that, and then you just carry on your way, nothing's going to happen at all. The snake, there's no snake that's ever going to crawl up and just like bite a person for no reason at all. Even something like a mamba in Africa, if you saw it and didn't bother it, it's not going to hurt you. But if you accidentally like step on a snake or something like that, there are people who accidentally, you know, step on a copperhead or something and they get bitten. In those instances, the only real treatment for snake bite is just to go to the hospital. If you're bitten by a non-venomous snake, like a rat snake or a water snake, you should clean it just like you would any sort of small cut or scrape, and that's really about it. Like it's not going to hurt you in any significant way. I'm sure we've all had worse injuries than anything a snake like this can do to us. If it's a really large snake, like a big python of some sort, you know, that's 15 feet long or something, they have bigger teeth and they can cause mechanical injury, just like a dog bite could cause worse mechanical injury. But a little snake like this it's not going to do anything. So, yeah. Yeah, snakes are not really dangerous animals in the grand scheme of things. I mean, yes, a venomous snake can hurt us, but the incidence of venomous snake bite in the U.S. is something like 8,000 per year in the whole country. And we have typically fewer than 10 deaths from snake bite in the U.S. each year, and the vast majority of those are people who don't get appropriate medical care. So people like religious snake handlers in our state, every death in Kentucky from a snake bite has been to a religious snake handler. There's never been a death here from someone who didn't refuse to get medical treatment. And then countrywide, many of the people, not all, there are some tragic instances where people didn't do anything wrong, but many of the people who die from snake bite in the U.S. are people who are drunk, they don't know what they're doing, they get bit, and then either they're too drunk to know they need to go to the hospital, or they fail to drive to the hospital, or whatever. Those are the real risks. And even around the world, the reason that people die from snake bite is not because we can't treat snake bite as humans, it's because the lack of medical care is so great in some places. You know, it's hard to access the care to begin with in order to get taken care of. And that is a real tragedy in many of those places.
Now, the way that snake is just laying there on your chest, can he feel you?
He probably can
And that's
feel
why
me
he's
moving
content.
around.
That's why
Yeah.
he's content to just sit there.
I don't know what he's, I don't know what he's thinking, but I mean, he's decided he's comfortable, I guess.
Yeah.
So the first one here, this is called a marginated tortoise. And this is a tortoise that is native to like southeastern Europe. You can find them in Greece, walking around in the olive groves. And he's called a marginated tortoise because the edge scales of his shell, these are called the marginal scales, are very large on this tortoise. And so because they're really big, that's where he gets the name. I'm down here a little bit. Nobody's afraid of the turtle, right? It's okay. And tortoises are pretty interesting because, of course, they don't swim. And because of that, they really are quite structurally different than aquatic turtles. So you can see their legs are kind of this more upright shape. They are called elephantine legs because they kind of resemble the legs and feet of an elephant. And the reason that they do is because having that shape basically imparts a lot of strength to them. So that kind of tree trunk shape that elephants' legs have is the same idea for the tortoise to have this upright shape, which makes his legs pretty strong. Because of course this is not a really athletic shape to be, right? I'm kind of glad I'm not shaped like a turtle, because it's not a very easy, not a very easy body to have, I don't think. I mean, yes, he's protected from predators, but the cost of that is carrying around this big heavy shell all the time. And so they have to have strong legs in order to be able to just get up and walk around. And keep in mind, this guy can live in areas that are fairly hilly. And he can go up and down hills and over fallen logs and rocks and things like that because he has those powerful legs. And I'll kind of try to point out. I'll set him up here on the table and see if he'll stand up for you. He doesn't always cooperate with me, but we'll see what he does. Is it better if I put him on the box, actually? You guys see him better? He's up on top. So, I don't know how motivating it's going to be. Can you put your legs down?
Come on, little feller.
He's like, where am I going to go? All right. You see how high he is? I don't know that he's going to stay there. Can you put your legs down here? There you go. He's like, yeah, that's good enough. Well, but you got the point, right? You saw him for a second. He can hold himself up pretty high, which is, it's pretty good for a turtle. If we compare him to an aquatic turtle, who is sound asleep. Aww. Good morning. Oh yeah. All right. So this is an alligator snapping turtle. So yeah, don't put your fingers in his mouth. So alligator snapping turtles are native to the Mississippi River drainage. We don't have them in the eastern part of the state, but we do have them in far western Kentucky. The snapping turtles that we have around here are just called common snapping turtles. And their behavior is fairly similar when you pick them up like this. But alligator snappers have these three large ridges of spikes on the back of their shell, and their head is actually a lot bigger than a common snapper's as well. They have a much shorter neck, which is kind of nice. A common snapping turtle can reach around to the side of his shell and still bite you if you grab him like this, but this guy is not really able to do that. But if you compare with his feet, of course you can see that his feet are webbed, and you also, I'm sure, can tell, don't bite me, that his legs are not as thick and strong as the tortoise's legs. And the reason for that, of course, is that he's not going to be out walking around, up and down hill and dale. He's basically going to be spending most of his time in the water. The other thing you can notice, I think, let's see if I can get them both up at the same time here.
It looks like it's stuck though.
So if you ignore the spikes on the snapping turtle, the tortoise has a much rounder and taller shell than the snapping turtle does. Can you guys see that? It's pretty obvious.
I know, he's got a big mouth.
And he does. And the reason for that is, of course, an aquatic turtle needs to be streamlined to move through the water. So having that lower, flatter shell allows him to be able to, glide through the water gracefully, whereas the poor tortoise, if we were to throw him in the lake, he would mostly just sink. He really is not going to be able to swim. He might be able to doggy paddle for a short period of time, but he's not really a very good swimmer like most aquatic turtles are going to be. Now, I know snapping turtles get kind of a bad reputation. You want to just hang out there for a second? But they're actually not really mean. They're just scared. And the reason for that is when... I don't think he'll actually fall. Don't make a liar out of me now. I don't think he will. He can see over the edge, so...
He's going backwards.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that he can see that he's going to go backwards off of it. Do you need to go back in your box? Get your lid off. So, when snapping turtles are on land, they are actually quite vulnerable to predation because the lower part of their shell is really pathetic. So the top part of his shell is impressive. You know, there's nothing that's going to be breaking in through this. But the bottom part of his shell is really small. And it really only covers kind of the center of the bottom of the turtle.
Oh, yeah.
And his legs are kind of hanging out. There's a bunch of exposed flesh around the edges of the bottom part of the shell. And that makes him very vulnerable. If he is found by a predator, even a decent sized snapping turtle, if the predator is able to flip him over, they can just start chewing on his legs. Which of course no one wants that to happen. And so the attitude is basically the way that they protect themselves. If you encounter a snapping turtle underwater, if you're wading or fishing, and you step on one, it'll just swim away. I've done it. Not intentionally, but and they know that they're safe in the water, and they can just kind of burrow down into the muck, and that keeps them safe. So if you have a snapping turtle on land, the snapping and the mouth gaping and trying to bite is really just their way of trying to protect themselves. There's one other really cool thing I want to talk about with this guy, and I'm going to kind of point him at you, and in the bottom of his mouth, kind of right, you know, maybe a centimeter or so back from the very tip at the bottom of his mouth, you can see his tongue, which is small and pink. So, I'll let everybody take a look. And it kind of looks like a little, like redworm in the bottom of his mouth. You see that? That's his tongue. Yep. And the hole is his trachea. So that's where he breathes. And he can close it so that when he's underwater, water doesn't rush down the trachea. He can control it. So, you see it? See the little tongue in there? Now, if you'll notice, the entire inside of the turtle's mouth is camouflage, right? So, when he's underwater, what will actually happen is he gets like algae and all sorts of stuff kind of growing all over him. And you can see he's kind of covered with all these little frilly bits, like little flaps of skin that stick out. And when he gets hungry, what he will do is open his mouth and he wiggles that little tongue. And of course the fish swimming by is like, oh hey look, a worm. And the fish swims directly into the turtle's mouth. And of course the turtle, he doesn't waste time, right? Turtle goes, chomp, eats the fish. So it's a very efficient way to hunt. He doesn't have to go chase down the food. He doesn't even have to be quick enough to grab it as it swims by, which is what a lot of turtles do. He sits perfectly still and he wiggles what has to be one of the smallest muscles in his entire body, and the food swims into his mouth. Now, we were very lucky to have lovely food prepared for us today. I didn't work very hard to get that food, right? Someone did. But even so, even me picking up the tray and sitting down and like using the fork to lift the food into my mouth is way more work than this turtle does to catch his food. And that's a huge advantage to him because it enables him, first of all, to be able to catch food when he's very weak. So if you think about something that, a more traditional predator like a lion, the lion has to have the strength and physical ability to run down, the gazelle or whatever and actually catch it, and, kill it with its jaws or whatever it's going to do. It has to be physically capable to do that. But the snapping turtle, all he has to be able to do is open his mouth and wiggle his tongue. Most things can do that, right? That's not a lot of physical capability. So if he's been in a state of starvation for a period of time, or maybe he's dehydrated because his pond dried out, or maybe he was injured in some way, he is still able to catch his food because it requires so little energy to do so. And that's a really big advantage to these. These turtles can live a really, really long time. Something like 10 years ago, somebody found a really large, this is the largest freshwater turtle in the Americas, and someone found a really large alligator snapping turtle in Mississippi or Louisiana. And it was, they brought it into, it was Fish and Game that wanted to like x-ray it and kind of examine it a little bit, and they found Civil War bullets in its shell. Oh. So not only was it alive during the Civil War, it survived being hit with bullets till just a few years ago. So they really are incredible turtles. This is just a young one. And the lifespan of these is easily 200 years or so. And this one here is probably in its 20s. So it's just
I know,
just
but I'm
a
getting
little
awfully
guy.
tired. My mouth is getting tired just watching it.
I know, right? I mean, you'd think he'd give up at some point, but
Yeah.
he's pretty persistent. I know. It's time for you to go
He's
back.
looking for something to eat.
Well, he's waiting for me to stick my finger in there so that he can tell me what he thinks of me. But now, as soon as I put him down, though, he'll shut his mouth.
Did she say that?
Really?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
if
somewhat.
I step away.
There you go.
Yeah. So it really is just trying to threaten me and convince me that he's a really terrifying turtle so that I will leave him alone. And then as I come back, I'm going to grab him, then he's like, all right, lady, leave me alone. So the next thing I have here is a small alligator. And I'm hoping he'll start making some noise in a second so that you can hear what he does. But I don't know if he's going to or not. Can you stop struggling like that? Thank you. Relax. He's kind of overdoing programs this week, I think, so he's,
Tired.
yeah, he says, I'm tired. I worked hard all week. Aren't I done yet? He is. He's about 3 years old.
3 years?
Around that. Yeah, when alligators are born, they're only about this long. They're really little. And this alligator is actually a confiscation. So here in Kentucky, it is illegal to have an exotic, dangerous animal as a pet. And that includes things like cobras, but also alligators and crocodiles, and then, you know, lions and monkeys and things like that as well. But, yes, exactly. These are still sold in various places, and people can go like in Indiana and buy one and bring it back, and then they're now illegal. And so when Fish and Wildlife finds one, then they'll confiscate it. Sometimes they give it to us. So that's where this one came from. So I'm not positive about his age. We've had him about 1.5 years, so I'm just making a guess based on how big he is. But I don't know for sure. I don't really know much else about his history than that. So alligators are amazing. I can talk about alligators all day long. I don't know why you're acting like I'm scaring you. I'm sorry. I'll tell you just a couple of things that I think are really interesting about them. One has to do with how they swallow their food. Now, we talked just briefly about the snapping turtle's trachea and how they can close it when they're underwater so they can control when water goes down their throat. And that is actually true of the alligator as well. And since he has his mouth open, if you look into his mouth, you can see, you cannot see down his throat. He looks like a Muppet.
Right.
And the reason for that is his tongue, which is on the bottom of his mouth, but it's stuck there. He can't really like stick his tongue out or anything. He actually can lift the back of it up to close his throat off. And the reason for that is usually the things that they eat are underwater. And so when he is underwater eating something, and they eat a lot of little things like crayfish and snails and small invertebrates that live in the water. And when he's eating, he doesn't want a bunch of water to rush down his throat because it could actually be too much water. Yes. And so he can open his mouth and keep his throat closed, and then when he's ready to swallow, he can close his mouth and open his throat so that the food can go down. So just as things kind of interesting. Now, did you hear it? Did you guys hear him? This machine's back there making some noise there. Did you hear him? Yeah?
Grunt. Is he grunting?
He is, yeah. It almost sounds like he has the hiccups. And he doesn't, though. What he is doing is calling for his mother. I know. It's kind of pathetic. You gonna do it again? You're done now. Did you hear? Could you hear? And, yes. So, I mean, we're safe. I'm pretty sure his mom's not gonna come busting into the door or anything. But, can you talk again, or are you done? See, he struggles, and then when he gives up, he starts calling for his mom, which is kind of pathetic. There you go. Yeah. And mother alligators are actually fantastic mothers. They will build a nest out of sticks and leaves and things. Talk.
Did you hear? And
Yeah, I heard it. It's like,
yep. And she will guard the eggs to make sure that nothing eats them. And when the babies start to hatch, they make that same sound. They call out to her, and she will go up. She opens up the nest with her claws, and she does indeed pick up the babies in her mouth. There he goes again. And she will carry them down to the water. And once they're there, she will protect them from predators, and there's some evidence she might even help them find food. She will stay with them for 2 to 3 years, which is a really long time for a wild animal to stay with its babies. And she does such a good job protecting the nest that sometimes turtles will come and lay their eggs in the nest as well, and then she protects them by accident, because they're there too. And if there's a baby alligator that cannot get out of its egg, she will actually hear it squeaking from inside. She will find the egg making the noise and pick it up and help to break it open with her teeth so that the baby can get out, which I think is pretty cool. What makes it amazing is that an adult alligator has about 1,000 pounds of pressure per square inch in their jaws when they close. So they're strong enough to like crush your skull, but they're able to be gentle enough to break open that egg without hurting the baby inside, which I just think is really cool. They can do that. It's one of the neatest things I know about alligators. Oh, that was a good one.
yeah, I think she said, put me down.
Yeah, he's done. Yeah.
How long does it take an alligator to get big, like big alligator?
It depends on how much they're eating. So if they're fed as much as they want and they're warm all year round, so like in South Florida, an alligator can grow as much as a foot a year. If they're hibernating, so like in the northern part of their range, so like southern North Carolina or Arkansas, an alligator probably is only eating about 5 to 6 months out of the year, and then they will grow something like 6 inches a year. So it depends on how much food is available and whether or not they're active all year long, because they do hibernate in the northern part of their range. And there's actually a viral picture this year of an alligator with its nose sticking up out of the water, and the water's frozen. So the nose is sticking up through a hole in the ice, and then it's completely frozen around there, and it looks terrible, but the alligator's fine. Like that's how they breathe when they're hibernating. So that's why I'm just making a guess on the age, because I don't really know how much they fed it prior to us getting it. I only know what we do. And they are sexually mature at around 6 feet long, typically. So 6 to 10 years for an alligator to reach sexual maturity. And then females can grow to be 6 to 8 feet long. The record size for a male is about 15 feet, average is more like 10 to 12 feet. So, but we don't know if this is a male or a female. You do actually have to put your finger inside the alligator to determine what sex it is. And so this one's so small, there's no real point in doing it. It would just hurt him, and we don't care.
Now, will this one get bigger?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, you can't keep them small by like keeping them in a small space or something like that, because you're just going to, cause damage to them from being kept in too small of an area. So they will continue to grow. Right? You're cute now.
Don't put your finger in my mouth.
No, yeah, you don't want to do that. So, though they're actually pretty smart animals, they can become almost tame. Sometimes you'll see a news story about someone with a pet alligator who's all sad because the authorities don't want them to have it, and the alligator's like living in their house and sitting on their lap and stuff, and they really can get very, very calm. We don't do all that with our alligators, so ours are more like, I'll put up with this if I have to kind of attitude, but they can be pretty chill, and they're really smart. They can learn commands, they can learn their name. I don't know that they're as smart as a dog, but they're definitely intelligent enough to understand basic things. Like our large alligator, he's probably 6 to 7 feet long, and when we feed him, we've taught him to do something called stationing, which is to be at a particular place. And for him, what we've taught him to do is to put his nose at the edge of his water. We don't want him coming out of the water at us, because he's 6 feet long, and I don't want him trying to like crawl up me to get the food. So he's supposed to sit right there. Even if we're outside of the enclosure, he's not allowed to climb up at us or he doesn't get fed. Well, he knows that completely, but he gets really excited, so it's hard for him to contain himself. And just yesterday I was giving him some rats, And I called him over, and he came over, and he was very good. And he put his head down, and then he saw me lift my hand up to give him, to put the rat like over the fence. And he started coming up, and I was like, no. And he immediately like put his head down and backed up. And it was really cute. So they're, you know, he's not stupid. He knows what he has to do to get food. So, and then of course, once he does that, then he gets rewarded by getting the food. So, but, well, I have one more animal to show you guys. So.
Alan wants to see Mr. Alligator.
Who does?
Behind you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right, I can see.
Close up, like hell.
You can come in and sit down if you
No,
know.
I can take you the phone.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to exclude you. You were so quiet back there. All stealth, I didn't realize. Okay, you ready to go back? All right, so the last thing I have is a little bigger snake. Now you're not stealth.
Where's Mary?
And this is a carpet python. So this is a snake that's actually native to Australia. And this snake's probably 6 feet long, something like that. She's a little bit bigger. She's not anywhere near like record size for what a snake can be. Maximum size, the longest snake anyway ever recorded was a reticulated python. The record's a little over 32 feet. The runner-up, second biggest, is the African rock python at about 29 feet. And number 3 is the green anaconda. The record length for green anaconda is about 26 feet. But anacondas are the fattest snake in the world. And a big green anaconda can be something like 3 or 4 feet in circumference. So that's a huge snake. Who cares how long it is? Right? It's big no matter what.
Anacondas have a huge head.
They do have a big head. I mean, any of the large snakes are going to have a really big head. And we talked, was it you who was asking about snakes swallowing food whole?
Yes.
So sometimes people will talk about being able to identify a venomous snake and tell it apart from a harmless snake. And one thing people will say is to look at the shape of their head. And they'll say venomous snakes have that triangular or arrow-shaped head. But actually a lot of boas and pythons also have an arrow-shaped head, as do some other snakes. It's not the best method for identifying snakes, but the reason that arrow-shaped head occurs is because their jawbones are very long. And the jawbone extends back, and having that really long jaw actually enables the snake to swallow bigger food for its size. So the big pythons, and like even this snake, you can see her head is a little bit arrow-shaped. And the reason for that is they can swallow a larger food item for their size. So this snake right here, we feed her rats, but she could probably eat something, I'm trying to think, if she really had to, she could probably eat an adult rabbit. So that's because of her jaw shape allows her to be able to open her mouth really wide. And the way it works for a snake, I do this little hand thing I do with the kids, but I won't impose it on you guys. But basically, snakes have an extra joint in their jaw. So our jaw is fused here. We have a bone that comes down, and then our mandible comes out this way. Well, in a snake, this is a joint. And that basically allows the snake's jaws to drop out and down. And in addition, the front part of their jaw is not fused. So on us, we have 2 upper jaws and 2 lower jaw bones that fuse together when we're still in the womb. And so they're attached here. In a snake, they never attach. They're just connected with cartilage. And so when a snake opens its mouth, see if she'll hold on to me for a second. So like our mouth goes like this, or our lower jaw is the only thing that moves. A snake's jaw can do this, it can separate in the front, and then the lower jaw can drop down. And that enables them to swallow something, on average, about 3 times the size of their head. So for a human, that would be like swallowing a whole watermelon, a whole Thanksgiving turkey at once. So it's pretty amazing. And they do this technique it's called jaw walking, where they're able to move because they're not attached in the front. They'll move the bottom part of their jaw forward and then, kind of creep over the food. So it may take them a very long time. It's not like they just go, and suck it down right away. It takes them a little while, and the bigger the food is, the longer it takes to eat it.
How long to digest like a rabbit?
On average, for an average size meal for a snake, it takes at least a week to 10 days. For a really large meal, it might take 2 weeks or even longer. And in the wild, many large snakes actually don't eat all that often. So a really big python might only be eating, 3 or 4 times a year, something like that. We've actually learned recently that the really large snakes, the big pythons that go very long periods of time without eating, they actually are able to turn off a lot of their metabolism when they're not digesting food. So their organs actually shrink in size and become almost atrophied during the period of time when they're not eating. And then after they consume a meal, something like 30 to 40% of the calories of that meal just go to turning on all their organs again so that they can digest the food. It's amazing. And there's some implications for that for humans that have been in starvation. They're actually doing research on what the pythons do so that people who come out, like refugees who are coming out of a war zone or something like that, who may have been without food, or people where there's a terrible drought and there's starvation, we might be able to better understand how the body copes with it, or what we might be able to do to help by looking at how the snake recovers from those periods of fasting, because it's a natural thing for them to do. It's totally bizarre. I mean, we've only known that for a few years. When I found out about it, I was just like, really? Is that actually true? So you don't really think about someone's organs shrinking, but they can. So pretty bizarre. The other thing I was going to talk about with this snake a little bit was just a little bit about, we talked some about snakes, what they eat, and you guys know they eat rats and stuff like that. The only other thing I wanted to mention, just because you're grown-ups and so you're capable of understanding it, is I know that many reptiles are very misunderstood, and a lot of people don't like snakes, which is fine. The world would be boring if we all liked the same thing, I think. So I don't have any problem with people who have a dislike of any animal, because we've all got something we're afraid of or uncomfortable with. But I would encourage you that, as the wiser members of our community, it's important to understand the role that all different animals have in our ecosystem. And even if you don't like snakes, or animal X, whatever, spiders for me, it's important to understand that they are helpful to us. And I've just been doing some research recently, because it interests me, and what is the role that natural systems play in our world? And it turns out that if you were to try to put a monetary value on filtering of water and pollination of plants and control of disease that natural systems do, all of those things, it's something like a third of the GDP of the entire planet. And so if we have to replace those services with things that we develop because the ecosystem gets too degraded, then we would have to come up with all of that additional money somehow in order to pay for those services. And probably they wouldn't work as well as what the planet is doing for us anyway for free. So I just think it's important to understand that even the things that seem distasteful, and snakes are an example of it, but they're probably not the best example. I think insects are probably the best example, because I'm not a fan of insects. Maybe it's just because I don't like them as much. But things like that we don't like or seem gross or uncomfortable to us actually can be really important in helping us to be able to survive. So I just want to kind of leave you with that thought, because it's something I've been learning about more recently, and I think it's important for us to realize the quality of life of our future generations is really going to go down if we have to try to replace all those services. So anyway, I hope I'm not being too preachy, but I've been learning about it, so I'm like, this is kind of amazing. So anyway, if you guys have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer some more.
To see some children this afternoon.
Now,
Are they allowed to touch?
I don't. So the problem is our liability insurance does not want people touching the animals. And I would do it, I would let you guys touch them. It's not a big deal. The problem is reptiles can carry bacteria. Salmonella is the best known example, but any animal can carry bacteria. And it's not a big deal if you just wash your hands. But my insurance is not happy about it. So
So do you have gloves on?
I don't, no. When I go to eat lunch, I just wash my hands.
That snake's wrapped around her.
Yeah, I mean, well, I tend to not lick my clothing or anything either, so it's all right.
Is the snake wrapped around?
Most of my torso right now.
Really?
So there's one part of her that's kind of draped over one shoulder, and then it kind of goes down around my arm, and then her head is somewhere behind me right now. Can't actually see it.
Start to constrict or anything?
Well, I never let them wrap directly around my neck.
Oh.
And the reason for that isn't because they would try to constrict me to eat me, but if she feels unstable and squeezes to hold on, it doesn't take that much pressure to choke somebody out, you know, like it's not, you don't need a whole lot of strength to do it. So I don't take that risk, because then, you know, there would be like a news story about how the snake attacked a person in the, you know, Georgetown Senior Citizen Center. The headlines wouldn't be like, stupid girl, let snake wrap around neck, you know. Well, guys, thanks for hanging out. Thank you. Thank you for feeding me. We even just unexpected surprise.
Well, that wraps up our show with our partners from the Kentucky Reptile Zoo. We hope you've had a good time and learned a few things. Join us for our next special episode coming soon.